Hey everyone, it's Switch65 and welcome to my hobby channel. After playing around with Army Painter's speed paints, my big box of zombies from Zombicide, I decided would they work in the grim dark miniatures that I've been painting for an upcoming Forbidden Psalms game. Using the so-called slap chop method and 100% speed paints, metallic still only in acrylic, resulted in a very dark miniature. And I feel like I lost some detail, as you can see in these undead and blood-spoiled tomb guards. Okay, it's grim and it's dark, but I still want to feel like it's a painted model and I want to see the detail, not just slap some paint on an object and hope for the best. So for the next round of miniatures, technically they're just called cultists in Bestiarium, but I'm going to use them as cultists in their scenarios as well as animal cultists in the regular rulebook scenarios. I decided I would start with a medium gray primer coat instead of black. And then I would dry brush up through one or two layers of lighter gray and finally the very top highlight of white. My hope is that this will leave some darker colors with the gray as opposed to black undercoat that killed any color at all. And using an all white primer does work very well with speed and contrast style paints. But they leave the finished miniature a little too bright for me and the aesthetic for this game that I'm currently playing. Here's an example of a cobalt that is painted typical slap chop and 100% white. And what I found works best for me, as opposed to what you see in that cobalt, is a combination of traditional acrylic paints, washes, and speed paints. For these miniatures, I'm going to use acrylics and washes on all the skin and speed paints on most of the rest. Metal parts and some highlighting will be done with acrylics as well. So we start with the brown undertone for the skin and work up to a mid-tone Caucasian tone. I then wash the skin with a reddish brown tone from Army Painter called Flesh Wash. After all that had dried, I came back with the mid-tone skin paint and reestablished the highlights with some light dry brushing. While this does make for a really great looking skin tone on the tabletop, it does spill over into other areas, which normally would not be an issue with traditional acrylics, as I can cover those oopsies, but with contrast style paints, those tonal changes will show up. So what I did is I had to come back in with some light gray and whites and hand paint back in the established proper tone value around the skin. This is why I chose to paint the skin from the inside out. It's my traditional method. That way I can be a little sloppy with the dry brushing, but I get the skin tone fixed all the way out, and then I can cover up with the clothes as you start putting clothes on. Although these guys don't wear many clothes. So now it's on to the speed painting. Runic gray for the robes. A combination of zealot yellow and plasmatic bolt for a light green on the hoods. Remember, I'm also using these as animal cultists, so I want some greenish like nature color. Plus all that gray just looked boring. I then swapped back and forth between traditional acrylics and speed paints. First up is the metal weapon parts. I just use a basic matte black as an undercoat for the metal to come later. I follow this with a dark wood speed paint for the wooden parts of the weapons, and because I'm using original speed paints, I let everything dry overnight before coming back with a matte varnish top coat, and that will give a solid 2 hours to cure and set. I don't want anything moving or bleeding. This allowed me to come back in and dry brush some pale sand on the wooden parts to kind of highlight the wood grain value, and dry brush bronze and silver over the metallics in acrylic. The last thing to do is little bits and pieces to pick out, as well as paint the bases. So here we go. Here's the money shots, the finished group. I can tell you I wasn't really sold on this whole speed paint thing when contrast paints first came out from GW, but I think I found a time and a place for a relationship with these paints. I have some 2.0 speed paints coming. I like some of the newer colors, and I'll be replacing the older stuff as I use it up, as long as I can find the right color. So I guess you can teach an old dog newer tricks. You just have to find your own way, your own techniques, and make your hobby what works for you. I hope you enjoyed this little painting tutorial, and until next time, happy hobbying.